I'm here with Benjamin Carraud, and I'm very excited to be with you. Welcome, Benjamin.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, yes. And I just get a kick out of the fact that we are doing this interview, one person in the United States being me, and one person in Vietnam being you. And through the wonders of technology, we're able to do this.
Amen.
And it's really exciting. And I'm thrilled by doing this interview for many reasons. One of the things that has happened since we did our last interview, there was a little bit of a gap, and an important thing happened in history, and that is that this book was actually published and is out, and I bought it out on the marketplace. Goodbye, Fields of Prokhorovka. And this is Benjamin's book about his experience that we're going to continue to talk about here today. The place that we left off was a very interesting place, and it's where Eugen, the man that you were in your last life, Eugen had died in this battle. And you were able to experience his consciousness, I would say, from his point of view. And it's amazing. And one of the things that I took note of was that you were in the consciousness of Eugen, and you were looking as like kind of an observer of life and of your previous life, that you didn't want to leave your men.
And it's true. Wow. First of all, thank you very much for this lovely introduction.
Oh,
It's a pleasure. I am glad that there was some time that elapsed between our previous interview and this one.
okay.
Notwithstanding the fact that my book has finally come out, it
Yes.
also
Yep.
bred a lot of reflections, of course, in my mind. To come back to the point that you mentioned, indeed, we left off previously when I
Yep.
was telling the memories I experienced, especially during that first regression. Because we stopped right at the crescendo of the experience, which was when I had experienced essentially my death. You can forget about Eugen Kuntzman right now. At the
Oh,
time, it was not in my perspective. It was purely, I've experienced somehow my own death. This is how I felt it.
right.
And indeed, you explained, and I had heard NDE stories before of immediately going into the light. In my regression, this was something that was totally absent
Yes.
because I experienced it from the perspective. There was an evolution even in those few days. I found out later that the actual time period is 4 days. In my memories, it was more blurry, obviously. I didn't know how many days. I just knew it was more than one. I had followed my men. It started from this very earthly injunction, as you say, from an officer to stay with his men and to essentially keep leading them. That, however, faded relatively quickly when it came clear to me that I had absolutely no way of acting on matter. That's usually how I describe it. You're just there, but it's a one-way exchange. You are not able to influence what is down there, and therefore you naturally take the position of an observer.
Yes.
That itself culminated in a hellish battle that I witnessed, which at the time made absolutely no sense to me, because even though I could remember it pretty clearly,
Hmm.
because there was some actual things happening, the battle itself made no sense. Strangely enough, in that state of regression, I felt like I still had the ability to analyze tactically what was going on at a simple level, of course, but far more than I would have ever been able to do by myself. I knew that what I was seeing was not from the realm of reality, at least not the way we conceive it on the Eastern Front. And God knows that Kunzman had been through a lot of battles. So he had a very front row experience. But that battle was, I'm talking about a huge conflagration of a lot of small skirmishes and firefights, sometimes evenly matched, sometimes not.
Hmm.
And that was the peak of horror witnessed while in that disincarnate state. I didn't go beyond that in the regression. So this is where it stopped for me. And then, of course, the regression moved to something a little bit different because then I got to understand that character a little bit because I saw what I see as key, very emotionally important moments that struck whoever's life I was re-experiencing. And that allowed me to understand that character a lot better, even during that first regression.
Let me interrupt a little bit and go back to something that you said that made this situation so unique, because I have been looking at people who have near death experiences. This is kind of a past life regression, spontaneous. It's very different because you were able to feel the consciousness. You were in the same consciousness that you are today, right? In
Yeah.
that consciousness, and that you were able to look for 4 days. You were there going through day after day with your men. And that's how strong your determination and your will and your consciousness was as a leader of men. And I think that is so interesting because your life in this life, you're a much different person. You don't put yourself at the forefront of the battle and that sort of thing. And I don't mean it that you're not brave, because you certainly are, to write a book about that.
I understand what you say.
Okay.
I probably don't have the same martial, the same warrior blood flowing in my veins, I would say.
Right.
It's not exactly what I have on plan for that incarnation over, let's say.
Yes, yes. But I think I mean, some of the things that happened in those 3 to 4 days that you saw men who were alive, dying, and then what their reaction was when they, as souls now, figured out that they were not men anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit? Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
asking you? Yes.
sure. I understand. I can answer from two points of view. The
Okay.
number one is that I indeed saw scenes like that where especially one that is quite clear in my mind, where a man looked disemboweled, and you could try to see him almost trying to patch up whatever was left. Of course, he's obviously dead. And strangely enough, there was incredible patience because I wasn't alone in that position as an observer. I was aware. Either we were all alone in the company of others. I don't know if that makes sense. We were not really interacting with each other. We were aware of each other. That's as best as can describe. And we were just like waiting for them to, in a way, realize that it was over. And naturally, they would gravitate towards a situation like ours, where you are observing what is going on. You're no longer focused on what happened to you.
And you were able to identify that those others that were watching this battle go on were not all from the German army.
No, some of them are obviously from the Soviet Union. I don't remember any distinction of whether men or officers or leaders or
Right.
followers or it was no the unifying factor. We were all men. I
Yes.
don't remember, and I don't remember any. It kind of sound weird, but anybody but combatants.
Okay. Yep.
Like the field of battle belonged physically to the living, and also just slightly off in terms
Right.
of perspective, those who had died. But you didn't have an assembly coming and witness. For instance, somebody asked me a very interesting question about a week ago. Asked me if I saw, because I don't remember seeing the light for myself, but did I see others
Oh,
experiencing that right after they died? Because obviously there was a lot of innocent people in that
yes.
scenario. You don't expect them to also dwell on the battlefield. But I was at a bit of a loss to answer that question because I don't remember anybody being, say, extracted. In fact, the natural conclusion of that state is to get more and more distance, both on what happens with the living and also what happens with others. It becomes much more lonely. But I didn't have that clear of a perspective when I was going through my regression because it stopped at the battle. It
Okay.
stopped actually when I saw the last stragglers trying to regain their lines, and the divide between my state and their state was extremely sharp.
It was what? It was
Extremely sharp.
sharp. Okay.
It's an image I use in my book as well. Realizing that those men I was seeing were still alive, and even though their situation was extremely dire, there was still a flame burning. In
Yes.
contrast, I saw that there was none in me. I was expecting nothing anymore. There was no hope per se. There was just being a passenger.
And when that moment came that you absolutely realized that you had died and that you could not have any impact on that, I think it was a difficult time for you.
Yes, especially since this is something that I remember really realizing when somebody told my brother I had just died. At the time, I didn't know it was in the regression. I didn't know it was my brother, but I knew I was naturally attracted to that person who was clearly inferior ranks to the ones around him, but he was my focus. And knowing that this individual named Georg couldn't feel me was probably if you allow me the metaphor, it was the nail in the coffin, let's say. After that, you don't
Yes.
really hope for anything because what closer situation can you be in than next to somebody you deal with and realizing that there is a barrier you cannot break anymore. That was a strong teacher.
Yes. And it's a very interesting process to talk about this, because at one point we're talking about you experiencing something that happened many years ago involving the consciousness that had inhabited a different body than the one you have now. And then it goes right over to the fact that it's you going through life as you and having to go cook breakfast to go to work and all that sort of stuff. And because you did have some time where you finished up with your therapist and you were continuing to have flashbacks, I believe.
Yeah, it was probably the hardest thing to write for me because it's a period of my life where I barely have any. It's not that I don't have memories. It's more like I don't have any salient points that you can say. Oh, for instance, I experienced this 2 weeks after
Yes.
this very nice day that I remember very well. It was very flat. So in terms of chronology, it's hard to say. I was definitely still suffering from it. I do have to say that the most intense period was the 30 days I had between the first regression and the second regression.
Okay.
Those were the ones where I felt like everything was open and there was no
Oh,
no sense. For the first time, there was no sense of really distance. I really feel like I was remembering my own life.
oh,
Before, let's say I wasn't sure really. I still had this doubt in my mind that a lot of it or all of it could be just symptoms of mental illness.
right.
But this regression was just too. I don't know how to explain. You've probably experienced situations where you have some intuitions that you are pretty sure don't come from you.
Yes. Oh, yes.
It was the sensation that everything was just too big, too coherent, and just too felt too lifelike to be imagination. I didn't immediately jump to it wasn't necessarily my past life or anything like that. I didn't go that far. But I started to accept that indeed those what I was seeing were the life experience of somebody that really existed.
Yes.
That became very hard to deny. Also because down the line, I realized that a lot of small details I saw during my regression were actually things that, even though they're not definitive proof, when you put them all together, they are coherent enough and lacking. There's not a lot of mistakes. It's not
Right.
like you have to weed out 50% of what you said and keep
No.
the rest. It wouldn't be intellectually fair. And it was a different phase, of course. Each one was marked by those big milestones, the first regression, the second regression. And of
Yes.
course, after the
Yes.
experience was different, naturally. Yeah.
Yes. I had the benefit of going to a person with the purpose of having a past life regression. You, at this point, in those 30 days, I don't think you really still had, at this point in time, a knowledge that there was such a thing as a regression. I have had a couple really wonderful past life regressions in which I had that same experience that you just described, which was I really knew it, and I knew it didn't come from my imagination. I knew that this is something that had happened and that I was there. I had been there. And it's very hard to describe that, but it's if you're imagining a pond and someone standing by it, but then instead of the person standing by it being in your imagination, that you suddenly have the feeling that person had. You have the emotions. You
Mhm.
have things that are very human. It's very different. But let's get on to talk a little bit about the fact that one of the things that really was a big impact on you was when you were doing some history work and you saw a reference to Eugen, the 8th of July,
Mhm.
1943 was a dark day. This is some text that you saw in a history book. The 8th of July, 1943 was a dark day for the regiment whose commander, Captain Eugen Kuntzman, died when his tank was hit by two anti-tank rounds. That sentence hit you a brick.
Woof. Oh yeah. There is a whole story as to why I ended up on that page as well. I woke up that day and I started to write notes. It's one of the first thing I did that morning. I went on my desk. I started to write some notes about the regression I had
Hmm?
because I felt like there was a lot of small details or very visual things like my belt buckle or my cap or the different medals I remembered wearing. And I was like, at least I want to write that down because that's something that could very easily slip away from my mind. And as I was doing that work, I had this almost injunction, not an injunction, but this flash of saying, I have enough information that I could try to see if there is somebody that is not. I don't think I searched directly for the man. I think I tried to understand about the battle at first.
Yes.
Did be a battle that can be identified? Maybe that would give me away. And I searched the keywords of the last day I remembered. And then this page appears like machine scan, the quality is not great. And I read that and I remember that was highlighted Because one of my keywords was the rank Sturmbannführer. So Sturmbannführer was highlighted. And so naturally my gaze was attracted to that. So the sentence was the very first thing I read on that page. The 8th of July was a dark day for the regiment. And when I read the name Kuntzman, this is what really started everything for me. Because to this day, it's really hard to explain how it made me feel. I think it's probably a mix of a lot of things, but it left me completely speechless. Because the sentence itself was pretty dry, the information given was relatively low. You just know that a regiment commander died. Apparently, it was a big deal, and he was killed by 2 anti-tank rounds in his command tank, which for me, for some reason, didn't really matter. I said, okay, fine. What I focus on is the name. I type the name, and I find a page in Polish that gives me a very short but detailed outline of this man's career. Ergun
Oh,
Kuntzman. Who
oh,
was he? And first of all, something doesn't feel right because the rank is not correct.
mhm,
So I think something is off. Turns out when I look down, I realize he had posthumous promotions, which
mhm,
explains the discrepancy.
mhm.
And yeah, and then I found out that this man's birthday was 9th of November, 1909. And the day I was reading that page was the 9th of November, 2017.
Oh my
And I
goodness. Oh my goodness.
and then I checked relatively quickly. Some things matched. Like I remembered starting the war at a specific rank. Eugen Kunstmann had the
Right,
same. I
right.
remember dying at a specific rank.
Mhm.
Eugen Kunstmann had the same, but he was recorded as 2 ranks higher. You would have to know that he died at his rank, which is something I was aware. And from then on, like this strange story started. It's yeah. Now I had a name. I had something I could latch onto.
Yeah.
That that
Yeah.
that first emotion was really the trigger because I think if I just had a slight doubt, I probably wouldn't have taken the time to really dive into the life of one man. Yeah, I
But
wasn't
it
interested in that.
it
Yeah.
it just came home to you. It
So,
lodged. And,
yep.
then after that, did you feel solid in him or not yet? Not yet.
Yeah. In fact, the first part of my investigation, if I may say, was try to find stuff that didn't line up.
Oh, okay. Yep,
Because I would have been pretty happy to be able to rule this one out
yep.
because he was a SS of the Totenkopf
I
division, and
see.
I wanted nothing to
Right,
do with that.
right.
Nothing.
You can
I've
see how
never, yeah,
be
but
difficult.
even beyond that,
Yeah.
yeah, some people I talk to, they have a fascination for the history of the Waffen SS as a fighting force. Think, oh, they were so valiant and so ferocious. That is true. However, from the start, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. It's a bunch of thugs.
Mm,
If people see nobility in slaughtering, just coloring the battlefield red everywhere you go,
yeah,
put on them. I never had this
right,
kind of
right.
so it's the strange thing is that I started to tick a lot of small boxes,
Yes,
places.
yes.
Obviously, the huge break was when as I was looking for information about Eugen Kunstmann, I discovered that some forum posts on some Axis history forums existed about
Mhm.
Eugen specifically.
Okay.
Some of them gave relatively contradicting information, but as a whole, it gave at least a simple story of Eugen, classic staff officer that moves up the ranks. But then I saw a message of his grandson there.
Yes. Yeah.
The post was 8 years old. So I assumed, all right, this must have been somebody who was doing a school project about his grandfather or something. But the post said, please write to me if you have information about the death of my grandfather. I said, me warm up my fingers because I didn't
Yeah.
hesitate for a second. I didn't hesitate for a second, Jim. I was like, this is it.
That's the link right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I oh yeah. I used to be shy when I was young. I
Huh?
can tell you I wasn't shy at
Not
that
bad.
moment. And
Oh,
I don't know why, but I did. I sent an email detailing everything I could verify and
yes.
everything I couldn't verify, obviously. And I just sent.
Oh, I think that was
And
a smart way to do it. You gave yourself credibility that you weren't a kook, wacky person. You were a serious person making a serious inquiry. And
yes. Also, there is another layer to that beyond my own credibility, which, to be fair, it was such a like a, throwing a bottle in the ocean that I
uh-huh,
didn't really. I said, at least you miss
right.
100% of the shots you don't take.
That's right.
But the aspect I was very careful about was I have personally done research work on the history of my family, even with my family being from the Alice side, so English and French, it's still a touchy subject. It's always complicated. There's always some skeletons in the closet, some stories that have been untold, some secrets that old people are hoping will die with them.
Yes.
And so I say, now I'm dealing with an SS officer that was part of a very infamous
Yes.
SS division. Let's be smooth.
Yep.
So I was really trying to say, I respect the memory of your ancestor, regardless of how you view my story. I just want to say that I come from the perspective of somebody who wants to extend a hand. And he replied in 15 minutes.
That's amazing. An 8-year-old post, and you replied in 15 minutes. Your
And
heart must have leaped.
Wait until you hear this, because I was talking to the grandson, right? And then he says, my father, so the son of Eugen Kuntzman, is actually with me as I read your message.
Wow.
So immediately the contact was made, and within 12 hours, we had exchanged a few messages. I have to give them credit. The Kuntzman family are extraordinary. I can only put myself in their shoes, and having somebody that comes with a story like that from a different country.
Yes.
The fact that they read my entire letter, first of all, shows, great open-mindedness.
Definitely.
And also their first concern was they were concerned about how I was, because obviously I said that it had troubled me, that I had been going through nightmares when I was younger and then turned to flashbacks. They were extremely supportive. From that point on, I found in them a very beautiful tale of resilience of human beings. Because I don't want to tell the story of the family. It's not mine to tell. I know what happened to them after the war.
Okay.
The Kuntzman family can hold their head high. Really, I have nothing but respect for them, for how they treated me and how they managed to go from what they've been through to who the Kuntzman family members that I know now are incredible people. So for me, it's a tale of how the human race, if you keep optimistic, it always ends well.
Yes, yes. And that's very good of you to bring that out, because yes, that some people that are listening to this, whether they hear the SS and they hear the idea that this man was an armed combatant against Allied forces, that they might have some critical thoughts and judgmental thoughts. And here you were able to get through immediately to the heart and soul of this family. Not the past events, but the heart and soul of who are the Kuntzmans and who are you?
I dare say that, and I hope I'm not sounding arrogant when I say that, but I hope I brought an emotional aspect that was missing in their memories of him. With those enigmatic figures, because Argon left a lot of questions when he passed away, obviously. Through the meager answers I was able to give, because I think that through my investigation, and I hope we can develop that a bit later, I found that Eugen was a complicated man. And while his past and his experiences do not excuse how he decided to use his talents, I think it gives a bit more depth. And I do hope that me coming to them and telling them what I experienced has given them a sense that Eugen Kuntzman was, after all, a man.
Yes.
And he deserves to take his rightful place in the history of their family, just like he has taken his rightful place in the history of the memories I carry. He's just one man.
I do want to jump into that a little bit later, because that is one of the most important parts of your whole story. One thing that I wanted to stop with is that in your research with the Kuntzmans, there were things that you could verify. There were things that they could verify. There were things that one of you knew that the other didn't, and that sort of thing. And so it seems like it really made the history very solid, because there were a lot of things that remembered part of and that they could tie into and that sort of thing. Eugen's father was a shopkeeper, right? That's
Yes.
that's how he grew up.
Yeah, he had a toy shop.
He
A
was
toy shop.
he was a
Yeah.
little boy whose dad had a toy shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in that time in Germany, that puts you in a special category. You are an independent worker. You are considered middle class, at least because the coming out of the 1920s, especially coming out of the First World War, if you were like a normal worker, this is a very complicated thing. But if you're independent like that, you're literally, Oregon grew up in a spa town, so it's very touristy, which of course I assume, I'm speaking, okay, this is pure speculation on my part, but this is something I remember, so I want to share it.
Sure.
The hardship that you go through when you're hardship, sorry to speak this way, but It's very volatile. If there is economic tension, your whole thing just straight up collapses. So
Okay.
you are at the mercy of dynamics within the country much more
Yes.
sharply than you would if you were, let's say, a seasoned factory worker that is
Right.
much more shielded by that because you're qualified.
Your financial life ebbed and flowed, as did
So
the economy. And
yeah, and it's so much more than the lived experience. It's also the perspectives, because I think that a lot of people in Germany at the time were scarred by the outcome of the First World War,
yes,
in the way that the war ended and the situation got worse before it got better. And that itself causes the fear of the situation like that coming back. Also explains why people who were in that situation were so keen to support far-right leaders, because they were the only ones who were seemingly in opposition against the very left-wing groups you had in Germany at the time, Spartakist et al., all these groups that were vying for power. I think people forget how close, how looming the fear of Germany becoming another red state was, because it was just primed and ready to blow up after the First World War.
geographically very close. And yes, just a big fear. And I want to soon in this interview process, I want to talk about Eugen as a man and how he was thought of and that sort of thing. And I think we're going to need to do that in our next episode because we're out of time on this one. So let's finish up now, and then we'll come back and get into who is this guy, Eugen Kuntzman? Where did he start from? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.